right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. The first story that I've got for you guys today, the amateur Olympia and Larry Wheels. So that competition just wrapped up. Larry Wheels wound up placing second here. So a little bit of a different outcome than last weekend where he won the overall at that Ultimate Warrior NPC show. So first of all, I think Larry looked much better here, actually, than he looked last weekend. I just think the quality of competition here at the Olympia Amateur was much greater than the show that he did last year. But overall, his look, I thought he looked much fuller. His conditioning still looked good. I think my big criticism of his last show was the fact that, he really, to me, looked a little over-dieted. He looked a little flat. He said he weighed 230 for that show. And here, to me, he looks like he filled out much better. I think he peaked much better. He had comparable conditioning to what he had with that flatter look, but he was fuller here, and he looked a lot bigger to me. I do also think it's worth pointing out that the lighting here for the Olympia Amateur was much better than the last show. But overall, I think Larry has done a phenomenal job this time around. This is a much different look for Larry than what we saw when he competed at the Nationals when he was competing in bodybuilding. He looks much better here, much more conditioned. And actually, surprisingly, for a guy that's usually around 300 pounds, a guy that's known for training heavy, being a power lifter, strongman, arm wrestler, he actually fits pretty well, I think, in the classic physique division. Obviously, he's really good with the vacuum pose. He's got a pretty good V-taper. And like I said before, I actually think the bicep tear that he had really looks pretty good because it looks like his favorite classic pose is that like vacuum with one arm front double bicep variation. That's his favorite classic like go-to pose. And that bicep is the one that got torn. And I think it actually looks insane in that pose. It's a really good pose for him. So I think it actually worked out, even though in the long run, it might throw off his symmetry a little bit in some of the other poses. In that pose, at least, I think it's a really, really strong pose for him. So aside from that, I think the obvious criticism is going to be he needs to add size to his lower body, fill out the legs a little bit more. But overall, for his first time in Classic Physique being these two shows, I think this is a really impressive first go-around at Classic Physique. And I guess the question of, is there a pro card in his future? Not right now, not yet, but I do think it's within the realm of possibility that we could see Larry Wheels earn an IFBB pro card in Classic Physique and potentially actually do well in Classic based on what we're seeing here if he makes these improvements. And like the conditioning being the best that it's ever been for him is pretty good, but I think, on a pro stage, obviously, it's going to be a different level of competition. He's going to need to be a lot more dialed in than this. But overall, I'm very impressed with what Larry brought here. Not an easy competition. Like I said, it's the Olympia Amateur, so the competition here was a lot greater than that last weekend show. And I think he did himself proud. I think the fans are happy with what they saw here. He delivered. This is what we wanted to see from Larry, and I think just all around really good job. He certainly does seem to be the YouTube fitness crossover king when it comes to trying a new sport and then doing pretty damn good at it. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below about how Larry looked here. Now, next up in the news, we got a 2 days out training clip. Michael Krizo training biceps and triceps in this video. And I was thinking about something with Krizo that's a pretty interesting thing to consider. So last year at the Olympia, he placed 12th. Now, he's said multiple times since then that he wasn't initially planning on doing that Olympia. That prep was kind of rushed. His main goal for last year was just to get his IFBB Pro League Pro card and not really necessarily to rush into the Olympia and qualify and do all that. But that this year was more what he had his sights set on, was taking a full year to prepare for the Olympia, which essentially he did. So I think we're going to see him look better this year. But the interesting thing to consider is the fact that he took 12th last year. And a lot of the guys that placed in front of Michael Krizo will not be there this year. So Ian Valliere was 11th. He's retired. So that's one placing Krizo will move up. Rafael Brandao was 10th. He will not be there this year. So now that's 2 placings that Michael Krizo will move up. And that alone would put him in the top 10 if he just looks the same as he did last year. So I've been saying for a while that I think he's going to be top 10. But now I think there's a possibility he could be top 6 because it's not just Ian Valliere and Rafael Brandao that are not going to be there. Now we also know that unfortunately Nick Walker is not going to be able to compete. So that's another placing that Michael Krizo would in theory be moving up, which would put him in 9th. Big Ramy is not going to be here, and he was 5th last year. So that's another placing in theory that Krizo would move up, which would put him in 8th. And William Bonac, who was 9th last year, will also not be there this year. So that's another placing he would move up, which puts him in 7th, which if Michael Krizo just looks the same as he did last year with no improvements, that would put him in the conversation just on those absences alone to be a first call-out, potentially top 6 finisher at the Olympia this year. So when I say that I think he's going to be top 10, you got to kind of look on paper and now say, it almost seems unlikely that he would be out of the top 10, and it almost seems more likely that he could be a top 6 guy here. And because, like I said, this is just on the assumption that he looks the same as last year, but he keeps saying that he kind of rushed into last year's Olympia, and he didn't do that this year, and he's more prepared and more confident for the Olympia this year and says he's going to bring a better package. I think he's going to be a top 6 guy. Because over time, you know, we've heard these names that have retired or dropped out or gotten injured or whatever, but when you really sit down and look at that on paper, that's a lot of placings that Krizo directly will be moving up. And I think these absences, I think they impact his placing the most. So I've said before that I think he's really going to shine this year, and this is going to be the year that he really gets noticed. And now, like I said, looking at it on paper, I don't know how you could argue with that. I think he's going to be right there in the mix. So you'll likely see him around Hunter Labrada, probably around Andrew Jacked, Brandon, Sampson, and that's basically your top 6 right there, with the exception of the top 2 from last year, Hadi and Derek. I think we could really strongly see Krizo really in that mix, really in that conversation. You can see in these videos the size that he brings. If he gets some really favorable comparisons with some of these shorter, smaller guys, like Brandon, like Derek, like Hadi, and he gets really good call-outs, I think we could really see him in the game here. Obviously, we're going to be looking at his back, seeing if he made improvements there. We're going to be looking at his conditioning, seeing if he comes in sharper than he did last year. But if he does those 2 things, I mean, I think we're going to see something pretty impressive from him this year. Honestly, I didn't really think about it until now, how much all those absences would really impact the lineup. But Krizo specifically, if you really look at it, he stands to move up a lot this year, and he could be a top 6 finisher easily. So I think his name belongs in a lot of these top 6 prediction videos. But as always, let me know in the comments below your guys' top 6 Olympia predictions after watching this. Now, next up in the news, some updates from Charles Definition Griffen, one of my favorite open bodybuilders because I think he looks so good with the vacuum pose, bringing some of the best conditioning he's ever brought when he won that Legion Sports Festival. He is another guy, like Michael Krizo, that stands a good chance of moving up quite a bit from these absences. He was 14th last year. Krizo was 12th. But in 13th place was Patrick Johnson, another guy that's not going to be there this year. So you look at that and you say, well, you've got Nick Walker out. You've got Big Ramy out. You've got Ian Valliere out. William Bonac, Patrick Johnson. Charles Griffen stands to move up potentially 5 placings, which would put him in the top 10 for the first time at the Olympia in 8th place. So you could really see Charles shine here. So I think when you look at all these guys that are not going to be there this year, it really is going to shake up the lineup, I think, more than people initially expected. And I think you're going to see guys, several guys, in the top 10 this year that have never been there before and are going to be in the mix. There's quite a few spots that are up for grabs this year that I think these guys are going to seize on. But we can't forget the person that this really affects the most, and that is Nick Walker, who posted today kind of going around Florida and going around the hotel in a wheelchair and then in one of the little scooters at the grocery store. I mean, it's heartbreaking to watch Nick. I mean, think about what he went through prepping for this show, all the money he spent on food, on gear, the time training, dieting, suffering, just to show up and get injured in the last minute like that. It's got to be, I mean, it's tough. I mean, not only can he not compete, but he's not going to get paid. And I think most people would have expected for sure that he was going to be in a placing where he would be getting some money, probably in the top 3 again. And now to see him there, not even able, you know, let alone compete, but not even able to walk around the venue. I mean, it's heartbreaking to watch. He's one of the best bodybuilders in this lineup, no doubt. And honestly, I think the Olympia lost quite a bit of competitiveness with him not being there. He's one of the top 3 in the world, and now he's a guy that they don't have to beat to place top 3. The Olympia lineup, I think, definitely took a pretty big hit here. Think about like the Arnold Classic earlier this year. They had Ramy and Nick Samson, and Andrew, whereas the Olympia doesn't have Rami and Nick. So I think the Arnold and the Olympia were actually pretty close as far as that top 4. I mean, that was a pretty quality top group of guys. And now Nick has to go back to the drawing board, and who knows when we'll see him back on stage again. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Olympia predictions in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss a video. And as always, I love you guys. Appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at NickStrengthPower. My Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power. My secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel. And consider subscribing to my third YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.